Hello again, this is Mike Westwood, and I'm going to demonstrate today how I can transform my physique using the anabolic steroid cycle that I'm going to show you right now. Boom. Okay, so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Mike Westwood, and this will be my second transformation video in the series. My first transformation video was several years ago, and I've received so many requests from people all around the world to do another video, so here we are. This will be transformation number 2. Okay, so the first thing that I need to say is that this video is strictly for educational and research purposes only. Do not attempt to replicate anything that I am about to do in this video. I have decades of qualifications, knowledge, and experience that enables me to perform this transformation as safely and as effectively as possible. If you attempt to do something like this without knowing exactly what you are doing, it could go very, very wrong and you can damage your health in the process. If you have any questions about this transformation, you can reach out to me directly on Instagram. You can drop me a direct message, or you can contact me through my website at michaelwestwood.co.uk. The fitness industry is in a crisis right now. We have top-level bodybuilders dying at a rate never before seen in history. People are taking huge risks with the amount of drugs they're taking, but it doesn't need to be this way, and I'm going to show you how I do things very, very differently using a safer, old school, moderate approach. And I will prove to you that you can still get excellent results without having to damage your health in the process. My first transformation video was taken down from YouTube and has not been available for several years, but that video is now back up on YouTube and it's available right now. So if you didn't see the first video, you can watch that on YouTube right now. Since my last transformation video, I've been completely off cycle for almost 4 years now. I do believe that coming off cycle completely, having long periods off cycle, doing PCT, post-cycle therapy, are the key to health and longevity in this sport. Okay, so I've had all of my health checks, I've done all of my blood work, I've got all my blood work results, I've had my ECG, echocardiogram, everything came back with excellent results. My body has completely and fully recovered since my last cycle, and my natural testosterone level is at an excellent level for my age. So basically, I've got the all clear for another cycle. So the plan is to do a 20-week bulking phase on cycle, and then that will be followed by 20 weeks cutting phase on cycle. So we're looking at less than 12 months. And hopefully at the end of this transformation, I'll have a decent enough physique to step on stage once again and see what I can achieve. Now, I'm not chasing my pro card. I'm not trying to be an IFBB pro. I'm not trying to get to the Olympia or anything like that. I don't have the genetics for that, so I'm just going to stay in my own lane and see what I can achieve using a very safe and moderate approach. So I'll give you a quick glimpse of my current physique and I'll show you in more detail later on in the video. Okay, so I've been bulking completely naturally for several years now, and I'll show you the state of my current physique. Very high body fat levels. Okay, so the doctors have told me that I am completely obese, but I'm not concerned because I have the knowledge and the experience that enables me to transform this physique literally any time that I want, and I'm going to show you how right now. So let me show you the cycle. Okay, so this is the cycle that I'll be using for the transformation. So the first thing that I have to point out is that the possession of anabolic steroids for personal use is not illegal in the UK. So no crimes are being committed here. This is perfectly legal in my country, and I'm abiding by all of the local laws because this is my own personal cycle. Okay, so this cycle that you see here, this is a very basic competition level cycle. Now, this may seem like a lot of compounds, but the first thing you have to understand is that this is enough for the best part of an entire year. It's literally at the stage where modern bodybuilding is literally just chemical warfare. But I'm going to show you a much safer way to do things without having to take any extreme risks using an old school, moderate approach. Now, if you just want to get shredded for the summer, you can do it with a lot less than this. If you need any information on how you can do that, you can drop me a direct message on Instagram or on my website at michaelwestwood.co.uk. Remember, any information is strictly for educational and research purposes only. Okay, so one of the most important things when you're considering doing a cycle is making sure all of your anabolic steroids are actually real and are actually legitimate, accurately dosed anabolics with the correct compounds inside the bottle. Because there is so many fakes out there, you just never know. So it's very, very important to lab test your products before you use anything. And don't always go for the cheapest option, because if it's too cheap, then it's obviously going to be fake. Okay, so let me take you through this cycle. So over here in this section, we have the bulking phase. This little section here is just the bulking phase. The middle section is the cutting phase. And over here, this is the ancillary meds, the PCT, post-cycle therapy, estrogen blockers, aromatase inhibitors, blood pressure medications, all the ancillary medications that you would need if you're on cycle. Okay, so let's go back to the bulking phase. Okay, so this is the bulking phase over here. Now, the bulking phase is very, very important because the bulking phase is where you actually build the muscle. This is where you grow and build your physique. Great physiques are made during the bulking phase. So this is where you create the muscle, and then the cutting phase is where you remove the body fat to reveal the muscle that you have created during the bulking phase. So this phase is actually probably the most important phase, in my opinion. Now, I'll be using all of these compounds in specific dosages, in specific combinations, in specific timings throughout the process in order to create a specific look ready for the stage. Let me just take you through the bulking phase right now. So over here we have our testosterone. So testosterone is going to be the base of the cycle. Testosterone is always the base of the cycle. So we have sustanon over here. This is also sustanon. So these two are essentially exactly the same thing, just different brands. This is called Super Test 450, but what this basically is, this is basically just sustanon. It's pretty much exactly the same as the sustanon, but it has one additional ester, whereas these have the normal 4 esters. This has 5 esters. Now, the dosage that I'll be using will be so minuscule. I'll start off at literally just 150 milligrams per week. Now, that dosage is so small, it's so minuscule that even TRT dosages are more than that nowadays. Okay, now, some people would argue that it would be very difficult to grow on only 150 milligrams per week, but I would argue against that because my body is very fresh at the moment. I haven't touched any anabolics for years and years, so I know my receptors are fresh. 150 milligrams per week is actually more than what my body would produce naturally, so I know I will make excellent gains off that, and I will run that tiny dosage for as long as possible until I hit a plateau, and then when there's no more gains, when I cannot grow any further on that dosage, only then will I increase the dosage, and I'll increase it by a small amount up to 250 milligrams per week. And at the very maximum, and I'll increase increment by increment slowly over time. At the very maximum push, I'd be looking at maximum 500 milligrams per week. Okay, next up we have over here. This is actually called Phenol 100, but the alternative name for this is NPP, nandrolone phenyl propionate. What this basically is, this is basically just DECA. So nandrolone decanoate is the longer estered version of this, so it's the slow release version of this, whereas this one, nandrolone phenyl propionate, is the fast release, the fast acting ester of nandrolone, DECA. So this is the first time that I'm going to be trying this. I've never used this before. I have used the original version of DECA, the long estered version of DECA, but I haven't used MPP. So this is the first time I'm going to try this. Okay, over here we have Primobolan. Now this is a very, very expensive compound and very, very difficult to get hold of. Most of the Primobolan out there is actually fake. 9 times out of 10, you will not get hold of real Primobolan. Now this is very expensive. It's one of the classic compounds. It's one of the favorite compounds of a lot of the classic bodybuilders from back in the golden era. Now I'm going to be running this. It's very, very mild. It's very, very safe. Has a lot less side effects than all the other anabolics. This is a compound that many bodybuilders run this all year round. So I'll be running this throughout the bulking phase. This produces very lean muscle gains without the water retention. Very clean, keepable muscle mass. So high quality gains basically. So I'll be running this throughout the bulking phase, and also I'll be running it throughout the cutting phase as well. So we have some over here for the cutting phase. Okay, and dosage wise on the Primobolan, I'll literally only be running roughly 200 milligrams. That's a tiny dosage, especially in comparison to what most other people are using nowadays. I'm only going to be using 200 milligrams per week on the Primobolan, maximum 300 milligrams top end, and I will achieve good results on that. So there's no need to take huge risks in this industry. We can do things a lot safer with a lot less compounds and a lot less side effects, and overall a lot less consequences. Okay, so let's talk about the orals that I'm going to be using throughout the bulking phase. So over here, you'll see some tablets in this. So what we have here is Anavar. Literally, that is the only oral that I'll be running through the bulking phase. Now, normally people would run something like Dianabol or oxymethalones maybe, but I specifically am not using those compounds because I don't particularly like orals, and I think the side effects actually outweigh the benefits. Whereas with Anavar, it's a very, very mild compound, very mild, produces minimal side effects, very safe, and also produces very good quality lean gains. So I'll be running that with that, and also that doesn't produce any water retention whatsoever. Okay, so when it comes to the Anavar, the dosage that I'll be running will be literally just 10 milligrams, literally just one tablet a day, and I'll run that for as long as possible. And realistically, the top end dosage, I wouldn't go above 50 milligrams. Now, in terms of dosages, I don't need to run high dosages. I can just run very mild, moderate approach, and I'll still get good results. So there's no need to take things to the extreme. You can still get very, very good results with a tiny, tiny dosage, and you can stay safe in the long run. Okay, next up, this one is an interesting one. This one is called TNE. Now, what that basically means is testosterone with no ester attached. So what this is basically testosterone in its most raw form. So instantly acting testosterone. So instantly bioavailable. Now, this isn't actually used by bodybuilders as such. This is more for powerlifting. This is more for strength sports. So this gives you a big boost of strength if you were to do a powerlifting competition. But I've actually included it just for some heavy lifting. So I've included this just for a little bit of fun during the off season because I do like to lift heavy weights. So let's see if this helps me get some new PRs. Okay, and next up what we have here, this was actually given to me by one of my close friends. So this is called MK677. Now what this is actually a growth hormone secretagogue. So what this does, this actually boosts your natural production of growth hormone. Now, I'm not actually using it for that. What I'm using it for is this is known as an appetite stimulant. Now, it can be very difficult during the bulking phase to eat 7 or 8 or 9 meals a day. Sometimes you have no appetite whatsoever, and it's very, very difficult to shovel in all the food. Now, the reason I got this is to help with the appetite. So sometimes when I'm physically feeling physically sick from eating too much food, I do need an appetite stimulant. So this may help me. I may or may not use this throughout the cycle. Okay, let's move on to the cutting phase. All right, so all of this you see in this middle section, this is all the cutting phase. These are all the compounds that I'm going to be using during the dieting phase when my calories are really low, the cardio is very, very high, I'm in an extreme calorie deficit, and I'm trying to preserve the muscle mass and remove the body fat at the same time. So these are all the compounds that I'll be using during that process. Okay, let's start with a new addition. So this is something that I haven't used before, and I didn't use it during my last transformation. My previous transformation video was done with just basic anabolic steroids. Now, what we have here, we have human growth hormone. Now, this is something that is very widely abused in the bodybuilding industry. Most bodybuilders are taking huge dosages of this stuff. Now, most bodybuilders are using this during the off season and during the cutting phase. Now, I won't be using this during the bulking phase. I'll only be using this during the very back end of the cutting phase, the very last final stages of the cutting phase. Now, the reason I'll be doing that is strictly to preserve the muscle mass. Now, during the back end of the cutting phase, that's when you are at risk of losing a lot of muscle tissue because you're doing a lot of cardio and the diet's really strict. You're on minimal calories. Now, this will help to keep the muscle mass anabolic in an anabolic state and help to preserve more of the muscle. So I'll only be using it during the last few months of the cutting phase, and I'll also be using it at a very tiny dosage, a very small dosage. Now, the dosage I'll be using will literally be 2 IUs per day. That's more of an anti-aging dose rather than a bodybuilding dose. Growth hormone as a compound in particular is quite a safe compound to use. It's actually far safer than anabolic steroids. Growth hormone has minimal side effects if used reasonably, whereas anabolic steroids can cause all sorts of problems, heart attacks, kidney failures, liver problems, all sorts, whereas the growth hormone is actually far safer than anabolic steroids in general. Most bodybuilders are abusing this stuff in combination with insulin. High dosages of insulin, multiple injections every single day. Now, insulin is something that is completely off limits for me. I won't be using any insulin. I just think it's too dangerous and it's not worth the risk. Now, most bodybuilders are injecting insulin 5, 6, 7 times a day with every meal, pre-workout, post-workout, in combination with human growth hormone. And that's what is used to gain the huge size that we see nowadays in some of the pro bodybuilders. But to me, that's just far too dangerous, because if you get the dosage incorrect, if you make one mistake with the dosage of insulin, you can literally die instantly. And one more benefit of the HGH is actually it's a mild fat burner. It does have some very mild fat burning capabilities. So that is very useful during a cutting phase when you're spending hours and hours in the gym, weeks and weeks, months and months, trying to burn away the body fat. This can help slightly along the way. Now, don't think that you can just take a bunch of growth hormone and get shredded magically, because that's not going to happen, but it will help very slightly along the way. So it will make the dieting phase slightly easier, burning fat a little bit extra for you along the way. Okay, so first and foremost, before we go into detail about the cutting phase, I just want to clarify that anabolic steroids alone will not get you shredded. Only the diet and the cardio can do that. The amount of work that you put in, the very, very harsh diet, and hours and hours and hours of cardio in the gym. If you're under the false impression that you can just take a bunch of steroids, eat shit, and get shredded, you're very, very wrong, and you'll probably end up looking much worse than you did before you took the steroids. So taking a bunch of steroids won't get you magically shredded. It's the amount of work that you put in with your diet and your cardio. That's what removes the body fat. The anabolic steroids are there to grow and preserve the muscle mass during the dieting phase. Okay, so let me just run through very briefly some of the compounds that I'll be using during the cutting phase. Okay, so what we have over here, this over here, Farmer Mix 2 and Cut Stack, these two are essentially pretty much the same thing. So they are, what this is, it's a blend of 3 different anabolic steroids. So we're looking at Trenbolone, testosterone, and Masteron, all 3 mixed. Now, that's a very common combination for bodybuilders that are cutting during the cutting phase, ready preparing for a show on a competition prep. Now, the trouble with Trenbolone is it's very good for body composition purposes, but it is also very toxic at the same time. So it does affect your blood work very negatively. It can affect LDL, HDL massively. It's also very harsh on the cardiovascular system in general. It can be harsh on the kidneys. So when it comes to Trenbolone, this particular compound in general, I'll only use this at a very, very minimum towards the very back end of the prep. So I'll be looking at a very minimum time on Tren. That's in order to reduce the risk of any side effects. Now, with the Tren in particular, the kind of dosages that I'll be running on that will be, I'll be looking at 150 milligrams per week. And I'll run that for as long as possible. If I can get away with running that throughout the entire prep, then yes, I will stick to 150 milligrams per week. But I think the very top end with Tren is 300 milligrams maximum, and that's the very top end. There are a lot of people out there that tend to run Tren over 1,000 milligrams, 1,500 milligrams per week, and that's just insane. The damage that can cause, it's just not worth it. So it's best to run Tren very, very low, and you can still get really good results from this as well in very low dosages without having to risk your health as much. But Tren is a very toxic compound, so it's best to run it at a minimum and for short periods. So this is 150 milligrams per mil, whereas this is 250 milligrams per mil. So this is a slightly stronger version of this, but I do prefer the milder versions, and it's slightly easier to control the dosage with a milder version. Some people do prefer to inject these compounds separately, so they will separately use Tren on its own, Masteron on its own, and testosterone on its own in order to control the dosages of each compound individually. So I do actually have them here separately as well. So I have the Tren, the Masteron here, Masteron, and the Test. So towards the back end of the prep, if I need to adjust any of these individual compounds on their own, I can actually do that because I do have them separately as well. Okay, and we also have Primobolan during the cutting phase. Now, this, we've already spoken about this compound, but I'll be using it during both the cutting phase and the bulking phase over here. Now, Primobolan is particularly useful during the cutting phase, and that's where it's more commonly used, but it's particularly more useful during cutting because it can increase nitrogen retention. So it massively increases nitrogen retention and also protein synthesis in the muscles. So what that means is that Primobolan is particularly effective at preserving muscle mass during a very harsh calorie deficit. So when you're on a very, very harsh diet and you're doing a lot of cardio, hours and hours of cardio, and you're possibly losing some muscle, Primobolan is very, very good at helping to retain that muscle and to protect the muscle that you've worked so hard for. Anavar. Now, so this is considered a premium grade Anavar. So this brand in particular, Balkan Pharmaceuticals, is actually pharmaceutical grade. It's a pharmaceutical grade product. So this Anavar is probably the best that you're going to get in the industry, in my opinion. Okay, over here we have an interesting, very interesting compound. Now what this is, I don't know if you can read that. So this is actually halotestin. Now halotestin is usually used within powerlifting circles. So halo testing is very, very good for power and strength sports, but this is also a little secret used in bodybuilding circles. So this is used within the last 2 weeks running up to a show. So you introduce this compound the last couple of weeks, 7 to 10 days maybe, running up to a show. And what this actually does, this is a little trick that bodybuilders use. What this actually does is it increases vascularity, it increases muscle fullness, it increases the graininess of the physique. So this is a good little trick that bodybuilders tend to use before they step on stage within the last 7 to 10 days of stepping on that stage. But once again, this stuff is very, very difficult to get hold of, and most of the halo testing out there is actually fake. It's like gold dust. So this is actually the real version. And the dosage-wise with the halo testing, we'd be looking at 20 milligrams, possibly at the very maximum 30 milligrams, and that's it. And another compound that is very similar, used in a similar fashion, should I say, as to the halo, is Superdrol. Now, this is used in a very, very similar fashion to the halo testing. So this is used at the very back end of a prep, at the very back end of a cutting phase when the calories are really low, maybe 2 weeks out from a show. People use this, bodybuilders use this in the last couple of weeks to increase muscle fullness and to increase vascularity, and it just gives a better overall look on the stage. But it's only run for the last 7 to 10 days before the stage. And again, Superdrol is another one of those compounds that is very, very toxic. So it has to be run at a bare minimum, no more than a week or two, and that is it, because of the liver toxicity is very, very high. So it's best to just run that. Only if you're a competitor, if you're just an average person looking for a good transformation, then you want to absolutely stay away from this compound, and also stay away from the halo as well. And over here, this section, we do have some fat burners. Now, once again, these are not going to get you magically shredded. These are not some magic pill that's just going to suddenly melt away all the body fat, but they do help very, very slightly and they do make the dieting process slightly easier, but I do stress only slightly. For me, it's very, very negligible, and the only time you really see a big difference with these types of fat burners is at the very, very back end of prep, when you're struggling to lose the last few percentages of body fat. That's when these types of fat burners come into play, and that's when they work at their best. Now, there are a lot of people out there that use very, very high dosages of all of these fat burners, in addition with stimulants and all sorts of other ingredients, and along with diuretics. Now, diuretics is a drug that is another one that is strictly off limits for me. I find that is very, very dangerous to use diuretics. Diuretics can damage the kidneys, they can cause blood clots, heart attacks. You can die instantly with diuretics. They're very, very harmful, but this is another drug that's abused a lot within the bodybuilding industry. All right, moving on to the next section. This section is for the estrogen blockers, ancillaries, PCT meds. Now, the PCT is the post-cycle therapy. That's where you come off cycle completely and use several specific compounds to restart your body's natural testosterone production. Now, most people in the bodybuilding industry don't do a PCT. They just stay on cycle using anabolic steroids continuously forever, blasting and cruising, and that's considered completely normal in the fitness industry nowadays. Now, bodybuilding is a very extreme sport, but if you want to stay healthy in this sport, you must come off cycle for long periods, let your body recover, let your body reverse any damage that was done on cycle. But most people don't do that nowadays, and that's why we have a very big problem in this industry. Okay, now when it comes to the usage of things like estrogen blockers on cycle, I'm strictly against the usage of estrogen blockers unless they're used for strictly emergency purposes only. Now, what that means is basically if you're displaying symptoms of gynecomastia, now gynecomastia is the growth of female breast tissue that can occur with the use of anabolics, with the rise in estrogen levels. If you're displaying symptoms of gynecomastia that you cannot rectify by adaptations to the cycle, then and only then would I recommend using some of these estrogen blockers to rectify the problem. But you don't just use estrogen blockers throughout the cycle. Many of the top coaches are telling their clients to use high levels of these estrogen blockers, and they do have some really serious side effects. Estrogen is heart protective. Estrogen protects the joints. Estrogen helps to control LDL, HDL cholesterol. So when you block out the estrogen completely, the bad cholesterol, the LDL rises, and the HDL, the good cholesterol, decreases, and then that can block the arteries and it can cause a heart attack. So it's very important that you don't completely kill estrogen. So if you are going to use these estrogen blockers, only use them in an emergency if you are displaying signs and symptoms of gynecomastia, and only use them in a low dosage so that you don't completely kill your estrogen levels. So for me specifically, these are only here for emergency purposes only. Some of the other section over here, this section is for the PCT, but estrogen blockers in particular on cycle are only there for emergency purposes only. So I won't be using them unless I get symptoms of gyno that cannot be controlled in any other way. So it's a last worst case scenario for me to use estrogen blockers. And over here in this section, we have blood pressure medication. Now, this particular compound in particular is quite a useful and interesting compound. Now, what this has been shown to do, this has been shown in studies to reverse and prevent left ventricular hypertrophy. Now, left ventricular hypertrophy is the enlargement of the heart, and that can occur, and it does occur quite frequently to bodybuilders, especially on cycle. Now, this particular blood pressure medication has been shown to reduce and prevent left ventricular hypertrophy, and in turn that can completely prevent a heart attack. So what we're looking at is a very useful compound for some people, and a secondary benefit of this particular compound is that it can actually increase your endurance levels. So it does actually help when you're doing hours and hours of cardio. It does actually help to increase your cardiovascular endurance levels, which is actually quite a benefit. Now, this blood pressure medication is actually being abused by several sportsmen, cyclists, runners, and it's not actually illegal. It's not actually in the doping list. So several people are actually using this to increase their cardiovascular capacity, which is, of course, very beneficial for bodybuilders as well, who have to do hours and hours and hours of cardio on the treadmill. So I'll possibly be using this at some point during the cycle. Okay, when it comes to my actual blood pressure is perfectly healthy, but the use of anabolic steroids does increase the blood pressure. Now, that varies from person to person. If you do have a very healthy blood pressure to begin with, it's very unlikely that if you use low dosages of steroids, it's very unlikely that your blood pressure will get out of control, but that can actually happen, and it is obviously based on the individual. So it's always safe to have some blood pressure medication on hand just in case your blood pressure gets out of control, and that's if you can't control it with natural supplements. Now, my blood pressure is very good. Now, over here, I do have a blood pressure monitor, and I do monitor my blood pressure. Even when I'm off cycle, I'd constantly check my blood pressure at least twice a day. On cycle, that'll be at least 3 times a day. I'll be monitoring my blood pressure. If you let your blood pressure get out of control on cycle, that can cause a whole world of problems. So that can cause kidney damage, kidney failure, heart attack, stroke. So it's very, very important to monitor your blood pressure whilst on cycle. Now, over here in this section, what you see right here, all these boxes right here, this is HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, and this over here is called HMG, human menopausal gonadotropin. Now, HCG, what this is basically this mimics the human luteinizing hormone signal. Now, luteinizing hormone is actually the signal that is responsible for the release of testosterone from the Leydig cells in the testes. So what this actually does is it actually boosts your natural production of testosterone. Now, there are two ways that you can use this stuff, HCG. There are two ways that you can use it. There's the old school method and there's the new school method. So the old school method is you use HCG at the very end of your cycle during the PCT, and what that does is that kickstarts your natural testosterone production again after it's been shut off for so long. So it restarts your natural testosterone production during the PCT at the end of your cycle. Now, the new school method is to use the HCG at a very low dosage throughout the entire cycle, at a very low dosage. Now, what this does is this prevents testicular shutdown. So it prevents the shutdown of your natural testosterone production. Now, this method can be very, very useful if you are on a long cycle. So if you're on a very long cycle, it would be advisable to actually use HCG at a very, very low dosage throughout the entire cycle. But you have to be very careful with the dosage, because if the dosage is too high, then it can actually desensitize the Leydig cells, and that can actually have the opposite effect. So if the dosage is too high, it can actually cause further shutdown of your testosterone production. But used at a very, very low dosage throughout the cycle, it can prevent complete shutdown. But both ways work perfectly fine. So if you use this stuff at the end of a cycle, it also restarts your natural testosterone production. So when it comes to the HCG, I'll be running a very, very low dose of that to maintain testicular function throughout my entire cycle, because the cycle will be at least 40 weeks. So it'll be the best part of a year. So I would rather maintain my natural production throughout that time frame rather than have my natural production shut down for the entire year. So I'll be running a very low dosage of HCG throughout the entire cycle to maintain my natural production. Okay, over here, what we have here is HMG, human menopausal gonadotropin. Now, what this is actually superior to HCG. What this does, this actually mimics the body's luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. Now, the luteinizing hormone is responsible for testosterone production from the Leydig cells, whereas follicle stimulating hormone is the hormone responsible for, basically, it's the signal responsible for fertility. So this is actually a better use than HCG. So the only issue is this is a lot more expensive, but I will be running this at intervals throughout the cycle to maintain full testicular function and full fertility as well. Okay, so over here we have another type of blood pressure medication, but this is only for strictly emergency purposes only. It's very likely that I won't be using this at all, because if you're using very low dosages of anabolics, it's very unlikely that your blood pressure will get out of control. And if it does get out of control, then you can most of the time control it with natural supplements. So this is very unlikely that I will be using this particular compound. But this compound is quite interesting in the fact that it does have some secondary useful benefits. Now, it's recently been discovered that this particular blood pressure medication can actually reverse liver damage. This has recently been discovered, and they're still doing studies with this. Now, this has the secondary benefit of reversing liver fibrosis, cirrhosis of the liver. So if there are any serious steroid abusers that have abused their liver over the years that have liver damage, this could be a very useful compound to anyone that has liver damage. Even alcoholics, if you have alcoholic liver related damage, this can actually help to reverse liver fibrosis. Okay, and last but not least, what we have here is a compound known as CABA. This is cabergoline. Now, this is a prolactin blocker. Prolactin issues can occur on cycle with certain compounds, and this is a very, very commonly used prolactin blocker by many, many top bodybuilders, even amateurs. They do abuse this quite a lot. There are many, many top level coaches that are telling their clients to run this compound throughout the entire cycle in large dosages. But what they don't know is that this has actually been proven to cause heart damage with long-term use. What this actually does is it damages the heart valves. Long-term usage has been proven to cause heart valve damage. Now, most of the top coaches in the bodybuilding industry are not even aware of this fact, and they're dishing out this substance and telling their clients to take very, very high dosages of this compound. I've personally seen some of the cycles that the top coaches in the industry have given to their clients, and a lot of them contain CABA in high dosages, even though it causes heart valve damage. Now, this particular compound is strictly for emergency purposes only. Like, this will be used only in a dire situation for me. So I tend to stay away from this compound. Although I would say that with short-term usage of CABA, it's very unlikely to cause any heart damage. Only with short-term usage. So it's only the long-term abuse that does cause the heart valve damage. Very, very short-term is unlikely to do that. Okay, so a better alternative to the CABA would actually be this compound here. Now, this is also a prolactin blocker with far less side effects and absolutely minimal risk. Now, this is called selegiline, if you can see that. So what this is a prolactin blocker, and it's actually also used as an anti-aging drug. Now, this actual compound has brain protective effects, so it has neuroprotective effects whilst also being a prolactin blocker. This is actually far safer than the CABA, but most of the top coaches in the industry, they don't know about this. So this is very, very rarely used by anyone. And it's also a lot more difficult to get hold of than the CABA. So most people just opt for the more dangerous CABA instead. Okay, so that's pretty much the entire cycle. Most of the stuff in this section is only for emergency purposes only. So these are just emergency substances, such as the blood pressure and estrogen blockers, prolactin blockers, things like that. They're for emergency purposes only. We do have PCT meds here, and also we have the HCG and the HMG that I will be running throughout the cycle. Now, the main parts of the cycle are over here in this middle section. This is the main cycle, and of course the bulking phase over here. This is the bulking phase, and this is the cutting phase. And don't forget, if you have any questions about this transformation or any questions about this cycle, anything whatsoever, you can reach out to me directly on Instagram, drop me a direct message, or you can reach out to me on my website at michaelwestwood.co.uk. You can drop me a message on the email function of the website, and you can also join my coaching team. So now let's check my body weight, my current body weight, and we can also take a closer look at my current physique. All right, and now it's time to step on the scales. Let's see my current body weight. 315 pounds. That's just my natural body weight with 0 steroids. 315 pounds, natural, everyday weight. And that's before I go on cycle. So I'm going to do that again in kilos. That is 142.7 kilos. Natural, everyday body weight. Okay, so that's my current physique. As you can see, that's my physique after bulking completely naturally for several years. Now, if you have any questions about this transformation, you can reach out to me directly on Instagram, direct message, just drop me a direct message, or you can go directly to my website at michaelwestwood.co.uk. From there, you can contact me and you can also join my coaching team. Now, the doctors have told me I am clinically obese. But I know the secret. I know how I can transform this physique literally anytime I want with the correct diet, the correct training methods, the correct anabolic steroids. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Let's go.